This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 97th edition of Sports Untold on Rainier Avenue Radio. I have a very special guest today. Present on me with Zoom, Brian Abker. Brian is a former Seattle Sports Radio AM 950 host, commentator. He's also been a play-by-play commentator. I learned that Brian did not start in sports media until his 30s. So I think Brian has some interesting perspectives on the whole industry. Brian is, I believe, working at the Zillow Group now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Paul. And great to be here with you. I appreciate you having me on. It's always flattering when somebody remembers you after your broadcasting career has kind of come to an end. So
But Brian, you're still out there commenting and opining on sports. I still think of you very much as a sports pundit, and I appreciate you coming on the 97th edition of Sports Untold. I think we've met a couple times. We've definitely interacted on sports media, social media. And right. I remember when I was going on KGR years ago, commenting on the Sonics relocation legalities, we chatted a couple times, and you were a gentleman. So Bellevue High, WSU grad. We're both Seattle area Generation X guys. I know we know hundreds of the same people probably, but good. We'll have fun, get into some sports issues, maybe talk about the broadcasting industry, and just we'll have some fun. Brian, this is obviously a very significant day, 9/11, 20 years after the horrific events that affected our country so much. Brian, why don't you just share a little bit about what you were doing on 9/11, and maybe give us, when you think of the sports world 9/11, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of the sports world, I obviously think about New York, and I think about the games that were played immediately following 9/11, and the Mets Braves, I believe, was one of the games that was played. It was significant because everybody was able to come together. People were coming together to kind of console each other, but to be a part of something that was positive. I don't think in my lifetime I've seen our country come together like we did after 9/11. And
Great.
The way the politics have been over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer than that, our country's vastly divided. And thinking back to 9/11, it was a horrific event, and thousands of people lost their lives, family members, mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. But when I look back at it, as a time of unity for this country. So, trying to glean some positive memories from that time. Now, I was a greenskeeper at Sahalee Golf and Country Club, and I actually had the day off. And I woke up and I turned on the TV, and the first thing I saw was the first plane hit the first tower. And I didn't even realize what I was seeing. And then as soon as I did, I called my parents, because that was a moment that I'm an only child. My parents were everything to me, and I wanted to make sure that they were aware so we could watch it together.
Sure.
And then what I remember the following day, Paul, was the skies were empty. There was no flights, there were no planes, there were no helicopters, there was nothing in the sky. And it was a very eerie, surreal moment to think about what was going to happen next. Was this a terrorist attack? Would it happen again? Were there other things that were on the way? I mean, we were all in that state of wondering what was going to happen next, while we were trying to focus on what was going on in New York and all the people that were lost, and people trying to save people in the rubble. So that's what my memory of that day was. What about you? Where were you?
Yeah, Brian, my birthday is on September 10th. And so I remember waking up the next morning. I was living in Madison Park at the time, renting a condominium or renting an apartment. And my sister called me to tell me that the towers were down, the Pentagon's been attacked. And it was just absolutely surreal. So that was my first initial memory. I was sleeping a little later that day, and I was so I was living in Madison Park. I would take the bus to downtown. I just started my solo law firm then. So I remember that vividly, just having a regular family birthday party event. I think we went to somewhere in Madison Park, and the next morning my sister called me and let me know what was going on. So, a sports memory I have, Brian, is after 9/11, during that Diamondbacks Yankees series, when President Bush threw out the first pitch. And not to get into politics, but no matter what one thinks of W, I thought he threw a perfect first pitch, and there was something kind of united, no matter what your politics are, what you thought of, President Bush. But there was something I thought kind of compelling about that Diamondbacks Yankees series that year.
Absolutely. And, I think that was a period in time, a very rare one in our history, where whatever side of the fence you're on when it comes to politics, you just wanted whoever was in charge to step up and lead this country in the right direction. Now, in retrospect, a lot of us thought that George Bush did that. Then there's a lot that thought, well, I believe in conspiracy theories, so I think that he was part of the group that instigated it. So it all gets muddled here and now, but back then, I think we were all together on the same page, at least most of the country.
Yeah, and we'll go beyond this general subject in a second, but one more thought I want to throw in. I think W did a really good job in those first few months after 9/11, but by early 2002, I think things were getting more politicized again. That's my recollection of it. I think in the immediate months there was unification, but I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it. It seemed like by early mid 2002 we were kind of back to some more fighting and stuff. But
I think you're right. But the immediate day and the days following, everybody wanted the same thing. They wanted safety. They wanted security. They wanted the people that were that have done it to get what they had coming. They wanted to find life in the rubble of the Twin Towers. That's what we all wanted, and our leader was leading us down that path to make sure that all that happened.
Oh, I thought so. His approval ratings were like in the high 80s for a while. Yeah. Paul Schneiderman, host of Sports Untold on Rainier Avenue Radio on the 97th edition with former KJR host Brian Abker. Hey, Brian, I got a big question for you. Are you going to pay $49.50 to watch Donald Trump be part of the alternate telecast of the Holofield Bill Fort fight tonight? Are you gonna be one of those guys that pays almost $50 for that?
I am not, and that doesn't have anything to do with Trump or anything else. It's just that hey, if Holyfield wants to come back and fight, that's great. Mike Tyson's been doing or did a charity bout 3 rounds with Roy Jones Jr. In fact, one of my great friends from college, Paul Schloss, is business partners with Mike Tyson and several other celebrities in a cannabis company. Mm-hmm. So I was getting video of Mike Tyson training well before anybody even knew that he was going to be doing this. And then I kind of put on Twitter, hey, Mike Tyson's going to come back. He wants to fight Holyfield, but Holyfield has too much to lose. And so he wants too much money. So that's not going to happen. And then Roy Jones Jr. stepped up, and, I got some really good behind the scenes intel about Mike Tyson. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what Holyfield does. And then if Tyson and Holyfield get together on another fight.
What do you think of a former president on 9/11 being part of a boxing broadcasting team on 9/11? What's your take on Trump participating in this?
You know what? I really don't have a thought either way. It doesn't strike me as odd. It doesn't strike me as cool. It doesn't faze me. In today's day and age, what politicians and celebrities do is basically anything they want, right? And they're doing them. They're being themselves. And that's fine. Live and let live. So I really don't have any thoughts on that. What about you? Do you have a particular feeling?
Let him do it. I mean, Trump has his, kind of tacky style to begin with. So let him do it if he wants to do it. I just don't know about doing it on 9/11. That's my 2 cents. on it. But you think a former president would be maybe a little more solemn on 9/11, but people, could see it differently, I guess. So.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
To each his own.
All right. There you go. Hey, you mentioned Mike Tyson, and this is a question I asked a lot of guests, and but I it's one of my favorite questions. I get great guests. So some of one personality answered Mike Tyson. I've had people, one guest answer Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I've had that see or Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Joe Montana, Floyd Mayweather, Russ Wilson, Nick Saban, LeBron James, Serena Williams, Sandy Koufax, Bill Russell. Who's a living sports figure you'd love to chat with, interview?
A living sports figure.
Yeah.
Got to be living, huh?
Well, my next question is who's a deceased sports figure I'd love to chat with?
Okay, so living, somebody different, because like a lot of the guests that you've had on that worked in sports radio, I've had an unbelievable opportunity to interview just about anybody and everybody from 1999 to 2015. If they were playing baseball, football, basketball, college or pro, and came to Seattle, I got a chance to talk to them. And my resume is not even as distinguished or half as distinguished as some of the guests that you've had on. So I can't imagine
don't
what
sell
they
yourself
said.
short, Brian. You got a good resume, so don't.
Yeah, it's good, but I look at guys like Gass and Graz. Those guys are legends in this city. Those guys have done more broadcasting and had more experiences than I could even think of, and truly admire those guys, and was fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time working with them. I would say probably not Michael Jordan. It might have been Michael Jordan before The Last Dance, but I think I got all I needed to get out of Michael in The Last Dance. And when he came with the Wizards, he did the big media press conference, and Guard Swanson asked most of the questions, but I was able to slide one in there. So that satisfies that. You know who it would be? It would be somebody unique, Simone Biles.
That's a great answer, Simone Biles. I love that answer. I'm going to add it to my list. So I forgot to mention too, and I like what you said about wanting to chat with somebody who's unique. Here's two names that two different guests gave me that I think you'll find fascinating. I had Rick Turner on, who you may know, local coach, and he was on Cage Art one time. Rick answered Oscar Pistorius, the South African runner who had some legal problems. He thinks it'd be fascinating to talk to Pistorius. So I thought that answer was unique and out of the box.
That absolutely is. Didn't he kill his wife?
I think he was convicted of something like, it's like that.
Yeah.
And here's another name I got real quickly. We go back to Simone Biles in a second. The other name I got is from former Husky Mark Patterson, former NFL player. I don't know if you know, Mark just climbed Mount Everest. And
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. Mark's done the 7 summits. He's on my show a couple of times. Roosevelt High School guys. We have that tie, a little over me, but we have the Northeast Seattle Roosevelt UW ties there. And Mark answered the deceased sports figure he'd love to interview. Remember, Jimmy Connors was his answer for the living sports figure. For the deceased sports figure, I don't have this guy's name in front of me, but a guy like one of the first guys to climb Mount Everest in like the late 40s, early 50s, a British guy, Sir William something.
Oh yeah.
So I don't have his name in front of me. I feel bad, but I like your answer with Simone Biles because you gave a little bit of an out of the box answer that maybe the average, male sports fan wouldn't give, so. Yeah.
And for me personally, I've never had an opportunity to sit down with a gold medalist and have a good conversation. And she's so unique. She's adopted. She's arguably the greatest gymnast that ever lived. I mean, you have Nadia Comaneci. When I was a kid, she was phenomenal. Olga Korbut, and then all the other U.S. Olympic gymnasts have come up through the ranks. But Simone Biles is something different and unique. And I think she would be a great conversation to have, especially after this Olympics, where she was tested a little bit and the golden child started to see people turn on her for some of the decisions that she made. I certainly didn't agree with those people, but I would be really curious to get her in-depth thoughts on how that made her feel and all that stuff.
Oh, no doubt about it. Great answer. And who would be the deceased sports figure you'd love to interview? Here's a couple names I got: Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Dean Smith. I had the famous attorney on, Alan Dershowitz, who was actually involved in the famous Kurt Flood case. Dershowitz answered he'd love to interview some of the deceased former Negro baseball players, which I thought was a great
Oh
answer.
yeah,
So
really great.
who's a deceased sports figure in history you would have loved to have chatted with?
Well, first of all, Alan Dershowitz. Wow, what a big name, man! What a great guest that is.
He was interesting.
I like that answer because that would really be awesome from the historical side to get with their perspective on what they were going through. That would be interesting. But mine,
like Josh Gibson,
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
Cool Papa Bell and
Right.
you know all those names. But for me, other than my parents, my only real childhood, well, I guess I have a couple, but my childhood hero that wasn't from Seattle was Walter Payton. Sweetness. Arguably the best running back in the history of the NFL. Might not be the best runner. Barry Sanders might have that, but I will go to my grave and fight and pound on the table and say Walter Payton's the best running back in the history of the game. And I never got a chance to, he was long gone by the time I got into sports radio. I got to see him play against the Seahawks one time in the Kingdome, and I was actually in seats by the visitor tunnel, and somehow he snuck by and I never even got to see him close up. And it was such a disappointment because I am the biggest Walter Payton fan.
Love it. You know who just answered Walter Payton? My immediate prior guest to Brian Abker, Dave Craig, knew Walter Payton. And he said that he would have loved to have an interview or extended conversation with Walter Payton. Although he already knew him, that was the answer Dave Craig gave.
That's
so
fantastic.
It's fun that a couple weeks later, Apker and Craig give the same answer on Walter Payton. So that's fun. That's fun.
That is fun. And hey, Dave Craig, there's a conversation in of itself. That guy seriously is like, and you and I have had the Marshawn Lynch conversation. I swear Dave Craig's kind of to me on that same line of like, God, he could be a Hall of Famer. He's got so many great statistics and things going for him. He was never the dominant quarterback of an era, though, which is kind of a problem. But Dave Craig was a lot better than I think people remember him being. He was a really good quarterback.
He's a heck of a nice guy. And I asked him a little bit on the Hall of Fame, the whole Hall of Fame question. He gave a very humble answer, Brian. He said, well, I didn't quite get to 40,000 yards, a couple strike short years. I had a couple years it didn't go as well. But the fact I'm in the conversation, I'm so honored to be considered. So he gave a real classy answer on his whole Hall of Fame. Okay, you brought up the Marshawn Hall of Fame thing. And you and I had a little social media exchange on that. And I want to pick your brain on that, Brian, but kind of a different kind of way. So sure. You and we're all good, but you kind of challenged me because I suggested Lynch had a Hall of Fame case. And you kind of challenged me, Paul. I want you to read up more and maybe talk to some sports writers. You kind of said, Paul, I just don't know if the foundation of your thinking on Marshawn being the Hall of Fame is all there. I don't want to mischaracterize what you comment on social media, but all right, fair enough. You brought up some points. But here's my kind of question for you, Brian. How knowledgeable does a sports fan have to be in having an opinion on the Hall of Fame or almost any kind of sports topic? I mean, does one have to have a PhD in political science to have an opinion on an election issue? I mean, no, seriously, does a Seahawks fan need to follow the team daily to have an opinion on a Coach Carroll decision? That's my question for you. How knowledgeable should a fan be to having an opinion on all these different topics, sport, including the Hall of Fame? That's kind of where I wanted to go on this. On this, but go ahead.
Sure.
Give me a take.
Well, and that's a good question, Paul. As far as how much knowledge someone needs to have an opinion, I mean, you can have zero knowledge and have an opinion, but how well is that opinion going to fare in a conversation with somebody else? And you have to be prepared to defend your opinion and your statement. And if you don't have enough knowledge to do that, then really, what does that opinion mean? It's just something to make you feel good about your thoughts, which is fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but be prepared to be challenged on it. Now, I wasn't trying to insinuate that you weren't educated about the subject.
Well, not as much as some others. I don't claim to be as much as some others.
No, but you have enough knowledge to have the conversation. What I was pointing out was, I think in having conversations with people that actually vote on players for the Hall of Fame, which, you know, not everybody has access to have that conversation. I understand. So I wouldn't expect you or anybody else to have that inside knowledge. I just have been able to get a different perspective on what things to look at when you're debating whether a guy should be in the Hall of Fame or not. Now, Marshawn Lynch, he's one of my top 5 favorite running backs of all time. He's probably 3, depends on what day it is, but he's always in the top 5. Here's what he has going for him. He's in the 10,000 yard club. That's a big number, 10,000 rushing yards. He has arguably the 2 greatest runs in the history of the NFL that we have on tape, the Beastquake run and the run in Arizona. Those runs are unbelievable. And even Walter Payton probably doesn't have quite the Beastquake run on his resume. Barry Sanders might have something similar in a different style, but not the way Beast Mode broke those tackles and got to the end zone and scored the touchdown on both occasions. He has 2 Super Bowl appearances and 1 Super Bowl victory. Those get tacked on to the resume, but he was never an MVP. He was never the dominant running back for a period of time, for a season, certainly not for an era.
Probably an all-decade team guy, though, in the 2010s, though, right? The teens decade.
Yeah, I think so. And I'd have to go back and look at the list of the running backs because, you know, you've got a few big splashes in there that maybe didn't have super long careers, but had 2,000-yard rushing seasons and, you know, things like that. And then Adrian Peterson certainly is in that, you know, committee. But yeah, I would say so. I love Marshawn. I just don't think that his resume speaks Hall of Fame.
Even if his rushing yards are close to Earl Campbell's. And Campbell's in the Hall of Fame.
Earl Campbell put up those rushing yards on fewer games in a season. In the 70s, they didn't have that 16-game schedule. So now we could go back and look, hey, how many games did Marshawn actually play? How many carries to get to those yards? And maybe they're close. But if we brought up the list of all-time leading rushers, you're going to see that there are guys with more yards and more touchdowns than Marshawn Lynch that aren't in the Hall of Fame and really haven't been in much of the discussion for the Hall of Fame.
No, I think you make a point that he's a close call. And I had a guy on who you know pretty well. You worked with him, a guy named Dave Softy Muller. Softy thinks Marshawn's going to get it one day. So that's so Acker and Softy can split on that one.
Hey, listen, now the other conversation, would I like to see Marshawn in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely. Can you imagine that Hall of Fame speech? It's going to be one of the greatest speeches in the history of the Hall of Fame.
Right.
For that alone, he's a great character. You know why? Because he's always himself. He doesn't care if you don't like him, if he offends you. He's not a fake person. He is himself all the time, and I love it.
Let me go back, though, to kind of the original question. All right, I know some people that are blue-collar people. They don't have masters in political science, veterinarians, whatever. They can have a more interesting political opinion than maybe a PhD in political science has. I know that's different than maybe commenting on a sports subject. But I was just I thought about our online discussion. I was just kind of wondering, how deep does someone have to be able to render an opinion on all sorts of stuff? That's we could extend that even further, So
I think there's a difference between an opinion and a back and forth conversation, right? So yes, somebody who doesn't know anything about politics could have a very interesting opinion, but when it comes down to it, is it valid? Is it real? Does it equate to the real world? Is it feasible? Or is it just unique and interesting, which is cool? But if you're going to have a back and forth about it, is it actually a real conversation worth having? That particular
We're
opinion.
going to move on in a second, but you would agree that one doesn't have to be an NFL writer who votes on the Hall of Fame to have a valid perspective on a Hall of Fame discussion.
No, absolutely not. No,
Okay.
you don't need to do anything. Here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
You just have to have watched the sport, read about the sport, been involved in the sport. You can't just watch, like, this is my opinion now. To have a good opinion on something, you have to have some involvement in it somehow. And as a fan, that means watching and reading about and listening to the experts, and then using your own eyes to validate what you see versus what somebody said. You have to have that minimum baseline, I believe.
All right. Fair enough. I wanted to have a little back and forth on this.
Yeah.
And fun discussion. Paul Schneiderman, host of Sports Untold, the 97th edition with Brian Abker. All right, Brian. So I still get Sports Illustrated. It's down to once a month now, by the way. I bet.
Is it? Wow.
Boy, I think when we were growing up, similar eras, I read it religiously every week.
Yeah.
So I got this from SI. Let me make sure I sort of attribute the source properly here. So let me read this to you, and I want to get your opinion on this. So this just blew me away as a football fan. In the 2020 season, due to the pandemic, stadiums across NFL, as we know, either had no fans or limited capacity. And the result was unprecedented. Did you know, Brian, that road teams had a winning record of 128, 127, and 1 for the first time in history, and road teams won 6-6 in the playoffs? As we know, the Hawks lost that home game when we lost to LA. So Tampa Bay goes 6-2 on the road, and they go 3-0 in away playoff games. So here's my questions for you, Mr. Abker. Do you see a big asterisk or some kind of asterisk on the 2020 NFL season based on this lack of a true home field advantage?
No, I don't. Only thing I would give an asterisk for is something on the field, something having to do with the players and the coaches. Anything having to do with the venue or the fans, I don't give credence to that is such a significant factor that somebody should have an asterisk next to their title or their win or their loss. I think when New Orleans went through Katrina, and I'm not positive about this, but I believe I remember New Orleans having to go and play games on the road until the dome was fixed up, but I'm not sure. But There's been other circumstances where teams have not been able to play home. They've had to go on the road based on an external factor. So I don't think that there should be any asterisks. Well, why?
Maybe,
do you just hate Tom Brady or what?
Well, Brady's a complicated guy. No, Brady's a complicated guy. I thought Brady was kind of fun at the White House this year, actually. But let me. Here's my thinking on this, Brian. I agree with you, but I think you can distinguish between a literal asterisk and a figurative asterisk. I see a little bit of a figurative asterisk with this complete lack of home field advantage. I mean, road teams went 128. 127-1 last year. I don't know. I see some kind of figurative asterisk to it.
Yeah, and maybe the travel was easier because other people weren't traveling.
Yeah.
Maybe because teams didn't have mini camps and all these hard practices and OTAs. They weren't as weary when they went on the road. I mean, I don't know, but those could be a couple different reasons. But yeah, there's no doubt. Well, now we'll see this year.
Yeah,
we'll take those records, and then we'll see. Now, do I believe that the Seahawks would have beat the Rams had they had the 12th man in the building? I lean towards it. I do. They weren't on that game, but they might have gotten some juice and some inspiration because those fans can do some things.
We'll never know. Back to Sports Illustrated for a second. That Sports Illustrated pundits predict the Hawks going 9-8 this year and just missing the wild card. What's the Acker crystal ball say on the 2021 Hawks?
Okay, so in the last seven years, I've been able to accurately predict the Seahawks record. The thing that I did get wrong last year is I thought they were going to win 2 playoff games, and they didn't. But they were gassed, and Russ wasn't himself and the whole thing. So I firmly believe that this is a better football team. And we'll see. This is without really seeing anything, but on paper, this is a better football team than the one that won the division last year. Now, the Rams will probably be improved. The 49ers had some serious injury bugaboos last year, and if they don't have that, they're going to be tough. The Cardinals are working their way up, so there's no question this is the toughest division. But to me, this is a 12 to 13 win team that's going to be fighting to win the division.
I like your
this.
confidence in the Hawks this year. I like it. Yeah. Acker has them going a lot better than 9-8. It's a 17-game season this year, which a lot of people haven't quite realized. We'll have to see. You and I will communicate again, maybe at the end of the season, and see how if your prediction comes to fruition.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to ask you about this, Brian. And when I ask this question, you don't have to bring in your personal experiences. Feel free to if you want, but I don't want you to hear this question, think I'm trying to get behind the scenes stuff from you. If you want to open up, you can. But Jim Moore, longtime Seattle sports columnist. Jim was on my show a few months ago. Nice guy. I really enjoyed him having my show, and we know each other kind of minimally. And Jim's column, for some of my listeners who aren't aware of this, is he's now at KJR and doing some writing at some newspapers. He wrote very openly about his termination at 710 ESPN Seattle. And he was very critical of the way he was treated by a particular host and director, and critical of the way this person also treated some other people. I got a couple of questions for you about this, Jim's column, which kind of went viral, didn't it? One, my mother has always said to me, Brian, if somebody disappoints you or lets you down, Paul, the best revenge is living well. Move on, and living well is the best revenge. On the other hand, I've had situations where I've been, I've told people they were being jerks, and I kind of go back and forth on that. Do I just eat it and living well is the best revenge, or or is it good to open up your feelings? I want to get your take on what Jim did. And I also want to get your take on, is there any kind of general etiquette and how somebody should leave a sports media gig? So I'm just curious to get your take, Brian.
Jim is, I would consider him a friend of mine. We're both Cougs.
Nice guy.
He's a great guy. We message each other every so often to check in. I love Jim. And, he obviously felt some type of way about his departure from 710, and it was buried deep. And I think his article was cathartic for him to get it out in the open, to talk about his displeasure and the way things went down from his perspective. And, Jim is at the age where he is watching the sunset on his career, and he would agree with that. So what the heck? He doesn't have anything to lose. This isn't a 25 or 30-year-old man that's going to try to continue his broadcasting career. And now, because of writing this article, it could have burned every bridge in town. That's not a concern of his. So from his perspective, I don't see anything wrong with what he did. And obviously it didn't affect him, because he's getting opportunities at KJR to do a little golf thing here and a little something there. And they're kind of trying to fit him in and piecemeal him in there. So as far as the general code of ethics, when it comes to how you leave a broadcasting job, I think that's probably the same code of ethics that you would use to leave any job, right? If you can do it, the best way to do it is to leave gracefully, no matter what the circumstances are. To whether it's your fault that you're leaving, or whether the company's making a mistake, whatever it is, if you leave gracefully, then you've got nothing. You're not going to be looking over your shoulder. You're not going to be having to worry about comments. People aren't going to be talking about you behind your back, because you left with class and dignity. So that's, I think, the best way to do it.
And I understand. I thought Jim's column was very interesting, and I'm not critical of Jim at all. And I've gone in my life, I've thought that interesting, but other people as well, when a disappointment has occurred or when you felt hurt by someone, I've gone back and forth. I've sweated up and moved away. And a couple of times I've gotten kind of confrontational. I didn't like the way I was treated, so
Yeah.
I understand where Jim's coming from. Now, let me ask you a follow-up here. And I appreciate your perspective. Does Mike Salk, do you think he owes his listeners or others any kind of explanation on some pretty serious issues in the way he's treated some people, including Jim? Does Salk in any way owe any? I don't know if he's made any statement on this, but does Salk owe anything? Should Salk be issuing any kind of statement or anything?
Well, I don't know Mike Salk. I've never had a conversation with the guy, but in general, I would say nobody owes anybody, any listeners, any explanation of why they hire or fire their employees. They don't. It's just, that's their business. That's their decision. And they don't owe anybody anything except for when they do have somebody on the air, that person provides the best possible entertainment and content and education that they can. That's what a radio station owes the listener. So I will say this: sports radio is a very cheap business for the lower half of the employees, for the lower 3/4 of the employees, and very lucrative for the top very small percentage. So it can be very cutthroat. It can be disheartening. You can be struggling financially for a long, long time while you're doing this job that you love, but your life outside of your job is miserable. And then you can find yourself in a position where your character is tested numerous ways.
I bet.
I was in that situation myself, and I found that when my character was tested, I failed miserably. But I learned a lot about myself in the process. I was bitter about a lot of things. My dad was diagnosed with cancer and he was dying, and I was broke as a joke, like extremely broke. Had to move in back with my parents, when I was 42. So I understand the emotions and the feelings and the actions that some people take. But when it comes down to it, anybody can be good and say the right things and do the right things under easy circumstances. It's moments like that where you find out who you are. And in my case with KJR, I did some things that out of frustration that were not good, trying to, I don't know, get what was mine, or, bitterness towards things that I thought that I had earned, that I was told that I would get. But the bottom line is, that's on me, right? So I would say to anybody out there, yes, it's a tough business, but if you're not prepared to be dignified and the person that you want to be throughout the entire process, don't even get into it, because you're going to be in for a rough time at some point. It will happen in sports radio. I don't care who you are. It's going to happen.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate hearing your perspectives on the more column and some other issues that go with it, and because you have some firsthand experience working in the field. So it was very interesting what you had to share. What is a memory that stands out at KJR? Can you think of kind of a fun memory, something that maybe an unexpected thing or something kind of fun that happened in your years there?
Man, there were so many fun things. I mean, I really, really loved my time at KJR, and just in broadcasting in general. I mean, literally every day was fun at work for me. I got to, cover all the sports teams, go to all the sporting events, and be in the media and eat the free food at the events and meet all the athletes and interview the athletes, and it just everything that any sports fan would dream of, I got to do. But the things that stand out to me are being able to cover the Seafair hydroplane races with Pat O'Day and the gas man on the call of the race, and me and Ian Furness in the pits. I grew up a Seafair kid. My dad was a Seafair Commodore. He took me to the Seafair Hydros when I was a little dude. So Seafair has been a huge event for me every summer since I was a kid. And then to now be a part of the radio broadcast with the legendary Pat O'Day,
Great guy.
and Gasman, and be able to interview these drivers and try to strategize what questions I was going to ask. And, that stands out as one of my fondest moments. Being able to create something that's entertaining for people, to me, was extremely rewarding. I had an opportunity to create a few things at KJR that were ongoing bits, if you will, or shows that lasted for a long time that people still remember me for. And I created those.
Captain Abker, right?
Yeah, and Ian Furness gave me that nickname.
You did, yeah.
And it came. So if we have time for a quick story, I'll tell you.
No, I got time, bro. Hey, I got 15, 20 more minutes, whatever, if you're up for it, So
okay, absolutely.
I got some more time, yeah.
So when I was young at KJR, Ian Furness was filling in. I think he was filling in the morning show, possibly for Mitch. I'm not sure, but I was filling in the traffic department for Tracy Taylor. And this was something that was completely new to me. I'm sitting in the traffic department. I've got these screens in front of me that are showing the traffic, and I'm trying to deliver it. And Ian's like, hey, man, don't even worry about delivering real traffic. Just do whatever you want. So I started making fun of drivers out there, and then saying I saw Softy pulling up to McDonald's drive-through. And, I came up with something that was funny and creative. And Ian's like, dude, we got to do that all the time. And so that started the creation of something called Chopper 950, which was essentially a comedy sketch that I would write that would be about 2 minutes. And every Friday I would do it and record it and pretend like I was up in the air doing the traffic in a helicopter. And that's something that a lot of people really love. Now, writing comedy is extremely hard. I don't know if you've ever tried to do it.
Very hard. I'm aware of people who've tried stand up and tried to write comedy. It's very tough.
And I consider myself a pretty funny person, and I'm able to riff with people on the fly. But when it comes down to writing something and setting up a joke, and it's difficult. So I didn't always like the material that I put out, but it was really well received. And the people that didn't like it really hated it, thought it was just terrible, disgusting, and mean-spirited. And I get that for sure. So those are the memories that I have, is those kind of collaborations with guys like Ian Furness. Dick Fane gave me a lot of opportunities to do stuff in high school sports and cover the Seattle Storm and do some things with the Storm, which I really, really liked. And that was a lot of fun. Neil Scott, who is called the Pros Pro, just spending time with him. I don't know if you've had him on your show. Have you had him on?
I met him. I liked him on. I had some of the aforementioned guys you mentioned. I had on, but I would like to get Neil on at some point.
Listen, let me tell you, Neil Scott's probably going to be the most interesting person you have had on in your 97 plus episodes.
I'm writing it down as a reminder to get Neil Scott on. Thanks, Brian.
You have to. And let me know when you do, because I want to listen, because this guy has no shortage of experience and stories, and he's such a wealth of knowledge, and he was a huge influence. I was doing co-hosting with him on his radio show called Recovery Coast to Coast, about addiction and recovery. Before I ever worked at KJR, I was doing some stringing for ESPN and Fox and covering the Seahawks and the Mariners. And that's how I met Neil. And Neil's like, hey man, you wanna join me and do some co-hosting on this show? And that's where I really learned a lot about broadcasting. The guy's phenomenal. So
great idea.
Those are the fun things that I remember, is the relationships with those particular people. And of course, Softy, I got to co-host with him for a couple years, and there wasn't a day that went by where Softy didn't make me and Kevin Shockey laugh so hard that we had tears coming out of our eyes. It was always during break, but there were days where we had a hard time gathering ourselves back together to come back on air. So that guy is so fun.
He's a character, no doubt about it. Hey, you mentioned Pat O'Day, who I was honored to have as a guest a couple of years ago. Let him rest in peace. Terrific guy. And what is your take, Brian? I love your Seafair stories, and I didn't see that coming. That's a fun thing about interviewing. I didn't see that Seafair memories would be among your favorite memories at KJR. I love your answer. I didn't see that answer coming. What's your take on Seafair kind of being eliminated? It doesn't seem like it's just a pandemic thing. It just, everything I'm reading, and I mean, we don't really have the same races going on. We don't have the airplanes going over us. Give me your take on Seafair becoming, is it obsolete now? Help me out. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I don't know, and from what I can gather and what I've read, it seemed like Seafair was going to be coming back in 2022, and the Hydro races and the Blue Angels and everything else. Now,
Hope so.
if there's been articles to the contrary, I will say this: Seafair has struggled over the last 20 years to be the draw that it was in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up as a kid. I mean, that log boom used to almost stretch almost all the way to I-90. It was so long.
I'm not too far at my Leschi home. I'm right by I-90 right now. So we grew up in the Seattle area together. I know it well, Seafair.
So and the shores were always packed. In fact, on the shores, they used to have a raft log boom that would go along the shores, and it would string all the way. And then they had to stop that because I guess it was dangerous. A couple drivers spun out of control and flipped, and almost had a situation with people in the rafts being too close to the course. So it's struggled for a lot of reasons, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of the influx of people that have moved here for tech jobs that just don't feel the closeness to the boat races like when you grew up here and there was less activities to choose from, where this was the highlight of your summer, the 4th of July and Seafair. Those were the two, and my birthday, of course.
I always think of Miss Budweiser, remember?
Yeah, Squire Shop, Atlas Van Lines, Miss Budweiser, those are huge. So I would hate to see it go away. I would almost love to see them move the course. So I'm here in downtown Kirkland. I live right across from the water.
Love Kirkland.
I would love to see it on the north end of 520 in the Kirkland area. Now, I don't know what the depths are. I don't know what the legalities and the logistics or any of that is, but I would maybe like to see them switch the race course over on this side, see if that brings any new interest or involvement or a new way of viewing the races.
Pat O'Day, when I had him on back in about late 2017, he thought that the powers that be were ruining the hydroplane races.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Ian Furness and I, we had many chuckles and conversations about the people running the hydros themselves and the race officials, where it seemed like, they didn't even know what they were doing half the time. So that doesn't surprise me that Pat O'Day would say that. And if he says that, he was pretty deep in as far as knowledge goes. So I would take that as probably very, very true.
Talk about a legitimate opinion on the hydroplane racing industry. Pat O'Day, I think, meets that standard, right? He met that standard,
Pat O'Day meets that standard. Yes. Now, so if Pat and O'Day and if I stated an opinion and Pat O'Day went, nah, sorry, I'd say, you know what? Okay, because I feel like I've got pretty good knowledge, but come on, Pat O'Day's been there since the day one, practically.
He was a heck of a guy. On a personal, my late dad actually worked as his attorney one time, so I had a little peripheral tie to him there. But he was a great guy. Hey Brian, Mariners are one game out of the wild card right now. It's kind of incredible on September 11th that they're really in the race. Seattle community reaction, is it too little enthusiasm, too much enthusiasm? Is a temperature check okay? Give me your take on the fact the Mariners are really legitimately in the race. And I want to know if you think that, how you measure the fan reaction right now.
Yeah, the fan reaction is going to be what it's going to be. Listen, when you've been disappointed and you have the longest non-playoff appearance streak in the Northern Hemisphere of any sport, you can't blame fans for reacting the way they do. Now, I will say this. I was on Facebook having a conversation with somebody who was bitching about the Mariners. And I'm like, listen, man, I get your frustration. I grew up with the Mariners in the 70s and 80s. They were garbage. And in the 90s, watching Toronto win the World Series when Toronto was the expansion team that came in at the same time as the Mariners. And then I watched this 116 win team do absolutely nothing in the playoffs. It's been brutal. But this year, this one particular year is not a year for bitching about the Mariners because they're doing everything they said they were going to do. They wanted to develop the farm system. They've got arguably the number one farm system in as far as the players rankings go in all of baseball. They've brought up a lot of young guys and we've watched them develop throughout the season. They've gotten better. They are a tough, gritty team that doesn't give up. Yes, they've got this weird run differential that is not sustainable, but guess what? Like you said, they're one game out of the wild card race. It's time to get a little enthusiastic. Fans don't want their heart broken again. I get it. You get excited, and then as soon as you do, the Mariners have let you down for decades, right? So people don't want to go through that. They want this team to get to the playoffs before they actually start getting excited. Here's the plan that Dipoto and Service were doing, right? So they wanted to build up their minor league teams, bring up these young guys, get them all cohesive, and then bring in some star players, whether it's hitters or a pitcher or reliever. And that's going to happen next year. You watch in the offseason, this Mariner team is going to go out and get probably 2, maybe 3 top flight veteran players to solidify this roster to make a run at trying to get to the World Series. This year, this team was not expected to be in this kind of running, even for the wild card. So they are exceeding expectations, in my opinion. I would love to see fans get more excited about this team, but they're just going to have to do it on their own accord. Where are you, Paul, as far as your excitement and enthusiasm about this team?
Oh, I'm having fun with this. And I think the fact their run differential is so bad and they're like, what, 13 games over, 1 game out. I think it's fun. I'd like to see more fans get more pumped up about it. And I'm enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. Paul Schneiderman, host of Sports Untold on Rainier Avenue Radio on the 97th edition with Brian Abker, former KGR sports radio man. Brian, you got time for a few more questions? I'm having fun going overtime with you, by the way. I'm having a good time.
I do. Fire away.
Yeah, good. I'm just having a good time. I got a little time on Saturday morning here.
I am too.
We can take this a little overtime. Hey, you're a WSU guy, Brian, and I want to ask you about Rolovich, and I got a thought for you, but feel free to comment on his situation. I don't know, and I'm totally speculating here. I don't know the details of his contract with WSU, but there's probably a misconduct clause in there, I would think. Do you think what's going on now is a bit of a showdown? Because I think he has till like October 20th or so to comply with Inslee's mandate. Is there just a time thing going on right now where if Rolovich does not get in compliance by that date, maybe he's out? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I know I asked you a couple questions within a question there, but give me your take on Rolovich. And is there something contractual going on behind the scenes right now, maybe?
Let me start by saying I wasn't thrilled with the hire originally.
Oh, you weren't? Interesting.
No. I felt like he didn't really do anything at Hawaii. But that was my opinion. I mean, if you look at his record in Hawaii, I think what is he, 1 game over 500? I'll have to double check, but I just didn't like what I saw. I didn't think, June Jones went to Hawaii and he resurrected that program and made it awesome. And then a few coaches after him kind of lost their footing. And then Rolovich came in and did better than the guys previous to him. But it wasn't what I was looking for after Mike Leach. And I wasn't a fan of particular things of Mike Leach either. But what I did like is I liked the fact that he had an exciting offense. He had a big name. We were being talked about in the national media. I liked all that. What I didn't like is Leach never had his team prepared for the Apple Cup. He never had his team prepared for big games like the bowl games, like mentally, like fired up. He just didn't have them where they needed to be. And then he didn't have them where they needed to be against some of the lesser opponents too. So, but he won. He got us to bowl games. and he brought some excitement back to the program. So for that, I admire and thank him. Rolovich, not my kind of coach. And what he's doing now with the vaccine, everybody, this is a free country. You make your own decisions. You do what you feel is best for you. But it's my opinion that when you are intertwined with students, student athletes, and other people where your decision can affect them, I believe you should make the decision for the greater good instead of just yourself. Now, I don't know what his reasoning is for not wanting to get vaccinated. I know there's non-vaxxers out there that believe certain things about the vaccines. I'm not one of them. I've never understood it, but it's not my place to understand it. People are making their own choices, and again, it's a free country. So from that standpoint, I think that when you're in a position that Rolovich is, you're making $3 million a year. I don't feel like you're entitled to make those same decisions that you would make for yourself outside of the scope of what your particular job is. I think you have to sacrifice when you're in a position that Rolovich is in. Now, to make matters worse, losing that opener against Utah State, in my opinion, was all on him. He called a terrible game. And
wasn't as bad as Washington's loss against Montana, though.
It wasn't. But it was a terrible game that they had, and I hate the term "couged it," but that was vintage couging it, and it was all on Rolovich. So, and now they got a cupcake, Portland State. Even if they blow Portland State out, it's like, who cares? You're 1-1 against two crap teams. So it's really hard for me to get excited. But I don't think there's, to answer your question directly, I don't think there's anything behind the scenes contractually, because he can come out and say, listen, it's a religious thing for me. What are they going to do? They can't persecute him for that. And I don't know what you need to prove or disprove. Heck, you being the attorney and the legal guy and probably dealing with semantics and things like that. I mean, he could probably say whatever he wants and it'd be very hard to disprove.
Yeah, I certainly don't know the behind the scenes details of his contract, but it's interesting how he gives a technical answer that he will follow the mandate. And maybe he's hinting he's looking for some sort of religious or physical, health exemption. And not to get too deep here, but some religious exemptions fly a lot better than others. And I again, I don't have a ton of case law in front of me. I don't want to get too opinionated, but I think people who are claiming a religious exemption, who are getting the vaccine for polio or the measles, whatever, that's a tough legal argument, I think, in a lot of ways. So we'll see what happens. I'm just kind of wondering if maybe by mid-October, if he's not in compliance with the governor's mandate, we'll have to see if something happens. So I don't know. There could be a little time frame thing going on there, but we'll see. We'll see.
I think what a bigger issue is for him is the lawsuit that he is up against. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to dive in and really take a look at that lawsuit, but things that I'm hearing behind the scenes, and again, this is hearsay, so it's basically speculation, but from what I've been hearing, Rolovich has asked players who either came in contact with COVID or had COVID to cover it up and to not tell anybody. And that's part of what's involved in this lawsuit.
Pretty serious allegations, yeah.
That right there, that can be, I'm sure, means for termination if that were to be proven.
You brought up an excellent point, Brian, that he may end up possibly being in more trouble with that civil suit than his position on the vaccine. That is a very interesting perspective. Let me get two more questions in here. Paul Schneiderman again on Sports Untold on Rainier Avenue Radio on the 97th edition with Brian Abker. Where are you on the Kraken? Are you pumped up? Tell me, I don't know if you're a hockey guy. I don't want to be presumptuous. A lot of guys of our era who grew up in Seattle don't know that much about hockey, but give me your take on this whole Kraken craze.
No, I am pumped up and I'm ready, and I'm not really a hockey guy. I mean, I enjoy watching the NHL from time to time, in particular during the playoffs. Been to a few T-Birds games, been to, some hockey games in the Old Key Arena or Seattle Center way back in the day. But yeah, growing up here, this isn't a state where hockey was very prevalent. Yes, there were some clubs, up north in Snohomish and just little places you could go to skate and play hockey, but it wasn't a high school sport. It wasn't something I grew up playing. We didn't have a team here locally, so it really wasn't part of my culture or anyone's culture for the most part growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s here. So I'm excited because how often when you're 52 years old do you get to dive into something that you really don't know much about and kind of go in blind, and it's brand new. It's a new experience for you. So I'm excited. I'm thrilled for the city, and I think it's certainly going to be a gateway to getting our Sonics back.
I'm pumped up too. It definitely can be a catalyst getting the Sonics back with the Key Arena remodel. And I'm with you. I have a lot to learn about hockey. I want to try to get more informed on the opposing teams and the players and learn more of the stats. I mean, I have to learn some basic stuff about hockey.
Exactly.
But I enjoy it, so, but I'm with you. I think it's gonna be a heck of a lot of fun. And I'm going in on a small pool, and they're not cheap, those tickets, but it's gonna be
I believe NHL tickets are the most expensive of any of the four, now I guess 5 major sports. So from that standpoint, that's a little bit of a bummer because you'd like to be able to introduce people to a new sport on the cheap, but this is not on the cheap.
Could be fun though. Let me get one more question with you, Brian. And by the way, I want to tell you something, Acker. This is a unique show. This is the longest interview I've done. So I want you to know that, Brian. Yes. This has been fun. I just keep chatting away, and so let me get one more question in. So you stand out in being my longest interview. So that's kind of cool.
Well, hey, cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fun. I was on a 27-minute clock for a while, but now I'm going beyond that. But here I'm going even beyond doubling that. But hey, I want to read some data to you, and this is a question about competitive balance in Division I football. Just a second, let me get this out. Back to Sports Illustrated. I got to put my reading glasses on, but real quickly.
Yeah, I know,
I'm 51 now, so we can relate. I just started wearing reading glasses a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
so
man, it's brutal.
Since 98, it looks like about 6 teams have combined to win like 74% of the titles. Bama's in there, LSU. And I think since 2014, since the Final Four happened or was established, it's even worse. Let me see if I have some numbers for you on that. I don't want to spend too much time here, but let's see here. College football's 14 playoff system is 7 years old. And just 4 teams have filled 71%, the 28 available postseason berths. So does the NCAA have a competitive balance issue right now with Alabama in particular being in Clemson? And I don't know. Give me your take on that general subject.
Now, are we talking just football, or are we talking all sports in general? Or football and basketball? What exactly are we?
My question here is more about football, but that's definitely a broader topic. Like women's basketball has been accused of lacking a competitive balance for many years, but does with NCAA Division I men's football, is this a problem that just maybe half a dozen teams or so are combining to win so many of the championships and stuff? I don't know. Give me your take, Brian.
Yeah, it might be a problem. I think there's a lot of people, including myself, that wanted to see the playoffs expanded to more teams, not a whole bunch more, but some more. With this name, image, and likeness situation now, where athletes are able to connect with an agent and start making deals on their name, image, and likeness, I think that's really going to throw this competitive balance out the window. If there is any competitive balance left, it's going to be gone. Because are you kidding me? A guy like Nick Saban walks into a guy's house with his family and he goes, listen, you're going to get a great education at Bama, but no matter what happens, because you're coming to Alabama, you're going to get a lot of money on this name, image, and likeness deal. Doesn't matter what you do. because you got my name and you got Alabama's name, you're going to get a lot of money.
And that's
And
compelling for a kid and his family.
It's huge. And I think that there's probably only a handful of colleges in the country that have that kind of power when it comes to recruiting. And they are already very strong recruiting. So I don't know. I don't know that it's a problem yet, because here I got college football on in front of me in the background, and I'm watching Oregon leading Ohio State 14-7 in the just starting the third quarter. So I love college football. I watch it religiously. I get up at 6 a.m. and I watch College Game Day. So it hasn't detracted me. And if you have an allegiance to a college, either you went there or you work there, or family members, or it's tradition, the competitive balance isn't going to keep you from watching and spending money on it. So I don't think it's a problem.
Something else in this article, Brian, about kind of what you alluded to a minute ago, that the studies show that the teams that have the largest athletic department budgets tend to win more too. So that's another part, I would think. Brian, would you agree with the competitive balance issue?
Sure. But you also have to think, and I don't know what the rules are anymore about alumni money and what can be used where, but look at Oregon. I wish Washington State had a Phil Knight kind of guy, right? I mean, Oregon's been able to rise through the ranks in the last 20 years with some of the most spectacular uniforms and changing the uniforms all the time. And their facilities are world-class, and now they're getting notoriety. And I mean, they've been a good football program for a long, long time. They've abused Washington for a long time now. I remember when Oregon was terrible, when they were the dregs of the conference,
I know it.
Oh, Oregon just scored again.
Just scored again. I'll have to turn that game on in a few minutes. Well, Brian, what a lot of fun. I appreciate you doing this, coming on Sports Untold on Rainier Avenue Radio. A lot of fun. And I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And fun to chat. And let's you and I stay in touch for sure.
Oh, listen, Paul, I had a lot of fun, and I'm sorry if some of my answers were a little long-winded, but I love these kind of conversations. I appreciate you thinking of me and remembering me, and
Of course.
you are doing a fantastic job. You've put this together on your own from scratch. I know you've got an assistant to help you with some of the technical things, but you're not doing this through a radio station or anybody else. This is you. You have built this thing, and you said this is the 97th edition?
Well, I appreciate your kind words, Brian. Yeah, just kind of a
Pretty
country
good.
lawyer with a little show doing this. But I appreciate your kind words, and it's been fun, and I love talking to all sorts of interesting people, yourself included.
Thanks, Paul. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
You too. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Brian.